Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our very fast growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of football recruiting, Miss Deana King. And Deana, we're going to take a trip around the recruiting trail for the Tar Heels right now, what the Tar Heels have done and what they could do here in the near future. Class of 2022 picked up its 15th commitment last week in Zach Rice. We hit on Zach Rice a lot in a podcast that we did prior to his commitment and ran right when he did commit. So let's kind of take a look at where the class is right now. They got 15 kids. They got a lot of them from the state of Virginia, got some big ones here in North Carolina. And Max said, we're going to stay on our footprint, get most of our guys, and we're going to step out every once in a while to get some special ones like Sebastian Cheeks. He's from Evanston, Illinois, right in Northwestern's backyard. And that's kind of where the class is right now. I believe it's number 9 in the recruiting rankings, but the more important ranking is the one that you do after every time somebody commits, and that's to factor in the composite player evaluation ranking. Rivals puts out a ranking number for each kid, which is a projection of their ability, of their potential. Zach Rice, for example, is a 6.1, which means that they think he's a future NFL first-round pick, basically. And you've got someone like George Bettaway, who's a 6.0. So most of the kids in this class range from, I believe, 5.6 to 6.1. There might be a 5.5 in there. So in that ranking, Carolina's 5th. They're number 5. They're tied with LSU, Notre Dame, and who else?
Texas A&M and Oklahoma.
Texas A&M and Oklahoma. That's a pretty high-rate district right there. North Carolina's bringing in talent. And we have urged people to distance yourself, separate what you see on the field right now with how you view where the program is headed. An enormous part of where the program that determines where the program is headed is recruiting. And recruiting is going very, very well, Deana.
Well, I've been asked if Carolina has a chance to have a top 10 recruiting class, and it's kind of hard because right now they've got 15, and I would be surprised if they got a top 10. Certainly top 15 is very attainable just because of the numbers. Carolina's probably not going to go over 18, 19 kids, and a lot of these recruiting rankings are based on numbers too. I pointed out on the message board that Notre Dame has been 1 or 2 or 3 all year, but it's because they've had 20 plus recruits committed. Texas, Oregon, and another school just slips my mind. They're all ranked in the recruiting rankings higher than Carolina, but in my ranking where I list based on the player average, they're not the only team is Notre Dame, which is tied with Carolina. So they're getting their players are a little bit lesser the average than the ones Carolina's got. So just a little bit better, truer ranking systems in my own opinion. And but these recruiting rankings, they get kind of like bonuses if a player's a top 100, a top 250, stuff like that. That adds on to some of these rankings too. So, but you mentioned 15. There's 8 on. I believe there's 7 on offense, 8 on defense. 3 4-stars or better on offense. 7 out of 8 recruits on the defensive side are 4-stars or better. So talent, really, really, this class is loaded. And
even at the number 9 class right now, that's very, very impressive. And I think to speak to what you were talking about, how deceiving class rankings can be, and Rivals is doing it the right way, because ultimately, hey, you got a lot of kids. That's actually, you have the more opportunity, better chances that someone's going to spring up to be a big time player for you. You could bring in 8 kids, and if only 4 of them pan out, that means you only got 4 in that class that panned out. So there is value in numbers. But when we started doing this, and one of the things that triggered you and I deciding that, let's figure out what the per player ranking is, was back in June, Carolina finally started getting a couple commits when everything really picked up everywhere when the live period opened up for the first time in a long time. And I remember we did this thing and I looked at the class. I said, my goodness, they're 32 and they're behind Old Dominion. Well, it's because Old Dominion had 21 commits at the time and Carolina had like 5 or 6 or something like that. So Old Dominion's picking up a bunch of kids that are, 2-stars and stuff, and it's going to accumulate with the points. So that's why your per player ranking thing is important. And not only just to find out where the class is, but to me, it just speaks volumes to the fact that they're bringing in dudes, big time talent, and bringing in, and you got to bring in more. But one of the things we've talked about before, Deana, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, at times LSU, schools like that, Oklahoma, they bring in so many of these 4s and some 5s in there as well, that even if half of them don't pan out, and in recruiting, I would say close to half of these kids don't really play to what their ranking was. That means if the other half does, you've got a lot of guys that do. So if you have 14 4-stars in a class, 7 of them don't pan out, that means that class has 7 that does. So over the course of 4 years, you could have 28 4-star kids on your roster that are panning out as 4-star or better players. Suddenly that changes things on the field.
This last one that I did after Rice, Southern Cal was in it about every week. Southern Cal had 10 or 11 commitments, and they were still in my list. But you looked on like Rivals and they're like 30th, or now they're in 44th or something, because the number of recruits, they had a decommitment. So they're down to like 9 kids, but their ranking per player was just, they're borderline outside top 10. So it's just some crazy numbers, some number crunching that sometimes I love to do to get more in depth of things, everything. Sometimes you have to dig into things, and some of this stuff is just fascinating.
I tell my staff to carry a shovel everywhere they go, because there's always something to dig for. And I'm a big believer that you can write be an average writer, but if you have great research, it's not an average piece. It's a well above average piece. And that's what we like to do here. The state of Virginia, when we were getting toward the class of 22, 21 was very heavy in North Carolina because there was a ton of talent in state in North Carolina. But we kept telling people, you kept telling people more. I didn't. I was just following your lead. I ride your coattails on this stuff, Miss King. You kept saying, look, Virginia's the place in 22. Virginia's loaded. It's got more high-end stuff, and it's got the kind of kids that Carolina's going to go after, not just in the Tidewater. Zach Rice is from Lynchburg. Travion Green is not from that area. You've got Jennings from Midlothian, the Richmond area. They've recruited Northern Virginia and throughout the state of Virginia, not just the Tidewater area. And really, this whole Virginia to North Carolina thing has been very, very real. There was a period where we thought, man, it's kind of died down from Virginia, because you got Chapman, who was the first one, Tyshawn Chapman, and then Tayon Holloway, and they kind of died down for a while. But man, it went on overdrive there for a while. And the 2 most recent kids from Virginia to commit are George Bettaway and Zach Rice, a 6.0 running back and a 6.1 offensive lineman. I would say that Virginia, there's that slogan that I can't even do it.
2 up, 2 down.
2 up, 2 down, which is the slogan. I'm old school Virginia. It's been a while since I lived there. So Virginia is for lovers. I would say North Carolina is for lovers, for kids from Virginia, because they are heading south to Chapel Hill in droves.
Well, I just would like to know what if Max serves some North Carolina barbecue at that cookout, because I don't know, it must have been some special sauce in that barbecue to get all those kids, because we think a lot of things happened at that barbecue back in the summer. A lot of vibes started coming out everywhere. I mean, it was a huge weekend for Carolina, and a lot of stuff that came out on social media. Of course, there's this group. Now they've got Zach Rice, another big voice on the recruiting trail. I think Travis Shaw and Deuce Caldwell have been battling out over the recruiter of the year. Travis, after Zach committed, said, I get the recruiter of the year. And Deuce was like, hey, not so fast. I helped out too. So you like to see the other kids recruit, and now they've got Zach, and they're going to be on the Andre Green, and I think that's a missing piece that UNC really needs. A big time wide receiver. Let's face it, Josh Downs needs some help next year. So Andre Green would do very well in this system because, let's face it, North Carolina, they don't have a 6'4" wide receiver that can do right now. They're all about the smaller type kids, and so Green has an excellent chance to get on the field next fall for Carolina if he
let's stay on Andre Green for a minute. 2 months ago, a lot of shifted. 2 months ago, we talked about Andre Green, and our message was, well, he's a luxury, because that room looked a lot better 2 months ago than it does now. Some kids have struggled. Joffrey Brown is gone. I mean, we thought, well, we knew that there was some route running issues, some consistency with that with Joffrey, and the drop stuff. Look, his brother had problems with the drops, and he fixed it and made himself an NFL player. Joffrey, all accounts, people that are close to them, Joffrey is higher end talent than Deana, but he's gone now. And what that means is for someone like Andre Green, that's one less dude to hurdle over when he arrives to get on the field. And he's got all the attributes. Now, again, he's a freshman. We caution people that freshmen usually don't get on the field right away. And when they do, they're in sort of a reserve type role. Although we did say after Zach Wright's video, if there is an offensive lineman that we've seen coming to North Carolina a long time that has a chance to play right away, it would be him. William Barnes played right away. I was in Berkeley, and I remember looking down the field in their second possession. I'm like, that looks like William Barnes. And he played 26 snaps in the season opener of his true freshman year. Now, he's taken a different course, obviously, but it has happened, and it could happen. And they might be relying on a few true freshmen next year. I think Travis Shaw is going to get on the field right away. Zach's going to have a wonderful opportunity because he's going to roll in January. By the time that they open up next year at the end of August, he will have been in school for 8 months. And he looks kind of ready right now. Andre Green's somebody else. And I think that the luxury thing, I think he's become a dire need. I think they want him. I think that their pursuit for him as if he is the most important part of this puzzle that they're trying to put together with this class. And they're putting everything out to try to reel him in.
He's been their main target. They've not really offered any other wide receivers, or, they're still watching, just in case things don't work out. There might be some other offers if Green decides to go to somewhere. I know Clemson's real high on his list. Georgia, I think that's a similar scenario with Travis Shaw. These three teams battling it out for Andre Green, but he came down for a game, saw good atmosphere for a game, had a great time. He's got one official visit left, and he's going to take that to at Clemson. They're working the details on that. So, but you remember we did a podcast a couple of months ago, and you put me on the spot. You remember that where we were talking about the targets, and how many did I say back then? We talked about Travis.
Yeah.
We talked about Travis, Zach Rice, BG Gosnell, Jake Pope, and George Bettaway. Mm-hmm. And I said 3.
Yeah. And the 3, and they've gotten 2 of them.
I got all 3 of them.
Well, you got all 3. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You got all 3.
I got 3 out of 3.
But since you brought them up, we don't think we don't think Pope's going to flip. And if he does flip from Alabama, correct me if you disagree. I don't think he's going to flip to Carolina. I do think that there are some possible flips that Carolina could get here. They had Will Hardy in for the Miami game, and he got a ton of special attention. In fact, I sat there and looked and watched Jay Bateman spend about 12 minutes with him just outside the tunnel behind the end zone where a lot of the recruits are, but it was before the rest of the recruits came out. Bateman went back in the tunnel, and Tommy Thigpen was hanging out, and I believe Alex White spent some time with him as well. And also on that visit, in a much more stealth manner, was Sherrod Caldwell, who was a teammate of Assad Brown, a 2024 four-star kid, a DB, who Carolina would love to have. And I think there's a really good relationship growing there between Carolina, Dre Bly, and Assad Brown. But Sherrod Caldwell is a Clemson commit. He is a four-star kid. And, Clemson has 5 commits in the secondary. So it's possible that someone could flip. And our understanding is that if something like that were to happen, that Carolina fans should also keep an eye on him.
Well, he came down with Oscar Smith is a great football team up in that Virginia area, and they brought they have a bunch of prospects, and a lot of their kids came down. I think Coville's got a younger brother who is going to be a good prospect too. So they came down. If you looked at that game preseason, you would have thought, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. Miami and Deana King coming back, and Carolina, the big things. You thought that was you circled that because you thought that was probably going to be the biggest home game, potentially, and things have not worked out. Miami's kind of having a rough year, even though they had a big win this past weekend over State, and Carolina's sitting at 4-3. But still, it was it was Miami.
Yeah.
Miami's a national brand, and Carolina, as you mentioned, they had a huge contingent of recruits. You were telling me there's like kids everywhere, Deana.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. We got Jacob on a wild goose chase.
I know we pay attention to stuff very closely, and I watch them when they come out. And there were a lot, and then they got hit by the rain, and they're passing out those little. They're not parkas, but they're some kind of rain gear, clear rain gear, and they're passing them out like it was a competition. But the time that Will Hardy was out there, it was beautiful, and then it cleared. It was pretty good. But let's stay on Will Hardy just for a minute. He committed to Virginia in late April, and here he is in October taking a visit to Carolina. I would think that suggests there's at least some interest just to find out. Maybe we're not saying he's flipping or anything like that, but I think that sometimes you do yourself a service by getting more information to either further solidify your decision, or maybe you realize there's something else out there.
Well, I think he's supposed to go up to Virginia and take a visit up there. I don't think
Notre Dame, right?
I don't think he's been up there since basically committing and stuff. And a lot of things can change. A lot of kids were scared with the COVID stuff, wanting to save a spot, and maybe decided to commit, early, and just making sure you had a spot. Not saying this was in the case of Will, but clearly Carolina offered him in August, and kids, if they're not interested, all they have to say, I'm not interested. And so the communication has been there. Communications has been I'm sure communications have been through all the commits. I've mentioned it before. There's unless a kid vehemently says, do not stop calling me, coaches, that's what they're paid to do. They're paid to recruit. They're paid to work till that kid signs that letter of intent, and that's coming up shortly. And a lot of these kids that we talked about, they're going to be early enrollees. So
most of them.
There's a lot of them. So Travis Shaw just played in his first game this past Friday after having a great spring season leading Bridgely to state championship. Got hurt there, had shoulder surgery, been very, very cautiously, because he's got a bright future.
Yep.
Made sure he was ready, got medically cleared. What a great sight to see him.
Yeah,
going out there at Grimsley, and there were two Carolina coaches there. Coach Galloway and Coach Cross was there to watch him suit up for the Whirlies against their rival Page this past Friday night, and they remain undefeated. A lot of these kids, I mention it every week in our commit results. Green Run, Tayon Holloway, they're undefeated. Cleveland with Omari and Hampton are undefeated. Connor Harrell, they were having a great year. They were like top 5 in the nation. Connor got injured Friday night and didn't play the second half. He was on fire. They were playing Hoover. And if you follow high school football, Hoover powerhouse in Alabama.
2 days from MTV. Remember that?
And
Hoover High School.
Yeah, and Thompson lost. It broke like their 27-game winning streak. Yeah. Connor was unable to play in the second half. Hope everything's okay with him, but he's been on a tear. We'll go into 2023. The only 2023 commit Carolina has Tad Hudson. Huff is undefeated, 9-0. He's having a great year. So, and then we had the newly commit offensive lineman, Zach Rice, Mr. Pancake, Big Nasty. Liberty Christian still undefeated. So a lot of good. These guys are really playing some good ball for their teams and helping their teams try to win state championships.
They want kids that come from programs with good cultures, so that it's easier for them to assimilate into what they are trying to build as the culture at Carolina. I do think the culture is there in many respects, but it will be there more so in the coming years, and certainly bringing in kids at big time prospects, 4-star, couple 5s that come from winning programs is definitely the recipe that coaches want to follow. One thing I want to add very quickly before we sign off on this, and this is with respect to Will Hardy and some others, I've learned from you a long time ago, and you to reiterate this 75 times a year. Don't so much listen to what they say, look at what they do. Look at where they go, when they go there, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that, and I'm not trying to tease anybody on the Will Hardy thing with that. I just think that it's important when a kid goes somewhere, when they're already, and that's the same thing. If a Carolina commit went somewhere, we'd see the same thing. We would look at this very, very same lens, obviously. Anything else?
Just that, it's the 2022 class has gotten some major cornerstones on both sides of the ball. That's where you build around. You got your defensive tackle, Travis Shaw, and then you got your big offensive tackle and Zach Rice, and the coaches are building around. They got a good foundation in this class. And a lot of people think that what they're doing on the field right now may affect some of them, but I don't think so. This group is tight knit, and Mac said it himself a couple of weeks ago. He's like, it may show guys that, hey, we really need you, and you got a great chance to come and play early. So
they see the bigger picture, Deana.
Yeah.
And by the way, I hope when they let us in to watch some practices in the spring, I hope in one of them they do those offensive defensive line drills with the pass pro drills where the guys are battling each other, because we're going to have to get the Zach Rice versus Travis Shaw battles on tape.
Well, and I'm sure
that'll do well on YouTube.
I'm sure that was a lot of Travis's recruiting pitch to Zach. Maybe we'll never know it, but if I'm ever get to Travis, I'm going to ask him. I'm like, did you mention to Zach that it's better to be on the same team than face me at another opponent? Something like that. Would you rather be my teammate or have
just
to
the value
me?
in working out together, the value in battling each other?
Yeah.
Why do you think Alabama reloads so easily? Because those guys, have been battling those dudes already. They're the hardest game. The scout team is playing the number 1 team in the country every week. So they're going to get better. So they're ready when their time comes. And I think that's part of improving too. You get more. That's why I said earlier, if you bring in 15 or 14 fours, 7 may not pan out, but 7 do. But they're still going to be battling each other. There's going to be a lot of fours practicing against each other, and they're going to get better and better and better. Anyway, Deana, fantastic stuff. It's kind of a healthy snapshot where the class of 22 is. We've got a lot of good stuff actually on the site this week, written recruiting stuff, and you have to be a premium subscriber to access it. It's just $8, 33 cents a month to have all that stuff. And if you're a basketball recruiting guy, David does these interviews that are like Moby Dick, but they're awesome. They're so big and they're so informative. I love it. It's like, and I let my wife know, hey, I'll be there in a minute, but I got to edit one of David's pieces. She's like, oh, okay, I'll see you in an hour, because there's so much stuff there to read over. I love it. So if you love basketball recruiting, David Sisk is your guy, big time. And if you love football recruiting, there's no doubt that Miss King is the one to go to get all of your Tar Heel recruiting stuff. Anyway, Deana, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Big time stuff. This class is getting more and more exciting as each pop occurs. 15 in the books, a couple more to go. They're not done yet. We know that for a fact. So it'll be interesting here in the next 5 to 6 weeks or so. She's Deana King. I'm Andrew Jones. We very much appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.
Thank you.